Hans, get the Flammenwerfer! If you guys watched my underrated units video from a few days ago, you know that I was hyping up Irondrakes pretty hard, and with good reason. At 700 gold, they're a relatively cheap and hard to kill unit the first Flammen, and if left unchecked, they can melt entire units and make their cost back in only a handful of volleys. Really good against Wood Elves too, who will be our opponents today. Orion is a problem for the Dwarfs though. His mass and weapon damage aren't super easy to deal with, and Wood Elf rushes can be pretty challenging to shut down. With the price changes to Wildwood Rangers, I think it's a lot easier to make them your go-to infantry in this matchup. And then there's a Laura Beast Spellsinger on her Majestic Eagle, flying high above the temples at Toothgrass Hill. So, my opponent is Shetland Apache, who is 100% a better Dawi player than myself, but he's not in control of them today. I am, and we're abusing runes. I've been talking about how Rune of Wrath and Ruin is better now in a lot of situations, and I stand by that. 72% slow for 38 seconds is completely bananas, but you need firepower to capitalize on it, which is why I have a bunch of Irondrakes and Rangers. Runesmith will give me some additional Rune of Wrath and Ruins, which is super nice. Dragonback Slayers in the back, and so for the build, 3 Rangers, 4 Miners, 3 Irondrakes all the way in the rear, and a bunch of Dwarf Warriors and Longbeards, and a Brimstone Gyrocopter in the back, replete with their new Vulcan Cannon that gives them a real juicy bonus versus large. They can drop bombs from on high as well, so it's a pretty nice combination. And would you look at that? Some Wild Rider Vanguard shenanigans deployed right next to my army, sprinting out of the forest to say hello. Cousin Balin should give them a royal welcome. Beastly Spellsinger on a Great Eagle with Flock of Doom and Manticore summons. Her job is very simple. Get on top of those Irondrakes alongside Orion and keep them from firing, because if you don't stop them from firing, they're gonna shred you. Now, traditionally, I'd say this matchup is really stupid and unfun, one of my least favorite matchups in the game from either side. It's usually 20 minutes of Waywatcher kiting and Ranger or Quarreler spam, but I think with the price changes to Wildwood Rangers, rush builds are a lot more viable versus Dawi now, especially when Orion goes for the Horn of the Wild Hunt and gives charge bonus map-wide on the approach. Unfortunately, Shetland forgot to bring it. Oops, he does have that Cloak of Isha though, for the ward save, which is nice, and the Vanguard deployed Wardens of Sithrall all the way in the corner. I believe they have the highest melee attack of any infantry unit in the game at 59. Now obviously the stock, armor sundering, and AP makes them super useful versus Dawi. So, Shetland really wants to spread the field here as much as possible, get those full surrounds off, and maybe kill a bunch of miners with blessing charges right at the start of the game, because they are a big threat to Azerite infantry. Big Overcast Flock of Doom, gonna hit 3 of those units, and he's coming out of the woods now, getting super aggressive, but already Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin and Wrath and Ruin going down on both Wild Riders, and look at them move. I mean, they're not moving. They're basically netted in place, and those Wild Riders are getting focus fired by 3 Rangers and all of those blasting charges, and that is disgusting. That is why I think that Rune of Wrath and Ruin is pretty damn good now, boys. That right there. He wanted to get in and kill a bunch of those miners and just say, alright, as long as they're dead, my infantry can get in unscathed, and then it becomes a relatively simple thing to start overwhelming the front line and getting into the back. Wasn't able to do it. Wild Riders just get seen off immediately as the Spellsinger of the Laura Beast chased down my Gyrocopter. So that was pretty much the best opening I could have asked for there. Quite enjoyed that. But I don't really have a good way of actually getting my Gyrocopter on top of high-value stuff. And I realized right at the start of the game, as Orion moves out to throw some Spears of Kurnos at him, I realized that he's going to be spending the entire game running, which can be a good trade for me, honestly. If I can actually make that Spellsinger chase me the entire game, then she's not casting Transformation of Kadan on my back line, not getting on top of the Irondrakes, and it's a lot more expensive than the Gyrocopter is as well. So that is a good trade for me, as long as I don't lose the Gyrocopter too early. So need to be on top of my micro, maybe move that shift command and make sure that I queue up a ton of different move orders so that it does not get tied down. But occasionally when it gets attacked, it does turn around and start fighting in melee, which is the last thing you want, because a Great Eagle will tear it into exhaust pipe, man. That's not going to be a very fun fight for a Gyrocopter, and unfortunately, I will not be able to sit them on top of the Wild Riders to shoot into them and actually get some use out of that bonus just large. Wild Riders, again, going up the center, trying to charge through the miners. Irondrakes are in range this time. Rune of Wrath and Ruin goes down, which is insane. I can't even remember what the cooldown is, but that was not a lot of elapsed time between the first and the second cast, and Wild Riders dropping to half in like a single volley. Irondrakes definitely doing a lot of damage there, Dwarf Warriors charged out on the flank. Another nice flock of doom in the middle of the Dwarf lines, though. And already, my formation is getting a little bit out of whack. My control group's getting a little bit uncontrolled at the moment. And it's an issue because if the Irondrakes or the Rangers get in the wrong position or chase after Wild Riders, they can quickly get pulled out of the real location they want to be in. And then they're easy prey for the fast mobility of the Azrite. They'll come in again. Dwarf Phalanx holding strong for now. Beautiful charge, but shouldn't do that much damage. Dwarf Warriors do have their charge defense against large. Wild Riders will retreat, and the Eternal Guard are in there, and they're going to use their AP to try to chunk through the Dawi defenses. Phalanx should hold strong for the moment, but Orion, he's in there, and Slayers are going to try to stop him. He is large, but, dude, he's just going to punt them out of the way. He doesn't care. They're disobedient children in the face of a wrathful god going right after the Rune Lord, and the Rune Lord wants none of that action, boss. Orion will kill him so quick. He's completely stripped down in terms of the Rune Lord. I brought no abilities for him whatsoever. No Master Rune of Oath and Steel, no Master Rune of Negation, none of that, so it will not be long before Orion puts him in the trash can if he's left unchecked. Wild Rider, again, Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin. I only have 2 casters who can actually use those abilities, but they're really slowing down the Wild Rider aggression like crazy. Irondrakes unleashing their flaming fury into the middle of the unbreakable Eternal Guard, the Winterheart Guard, who are just going to get bathed in napalm and explosive satchels, and they're going to melt away. And so far, things are going very, very well for the Dawi. But this is typically how the opening of games against Dwarfs will go. They have overwhelming range superiority, right? They are going to trash a melee build on the rush in. The question is, once they actually make it into melee, can the Wood Elves actually start turning it back in their favor? And they have a lot of armor piercing, and Orion is already causing havoc in the rear. So they might be able to. Which leaves me in a bit of a conundrum, because I can't really afford to completely ignore Orion, because if I do, he'll just run stuff over with that 500 weapon strength. He hits super, super hard. Ton of armor piercing, but I can't really kill him. So the best thing to do is probably just throw chaff his way and hope that he spends a long time killing Dwarf Warriors or Rangers. And try to run away the best you can, but of course he's way faster than Dwarfs, so can't really escape that easily. And there's no way we're escaping from Wild Riders, barreling right up the center, chunking right through that formation, charging right on through, setting Rangers flying, and Orion, yeah, he's gonna start jibbing stuff too. That hurts. That just hurts a lot, man. Those poor Rangers are not having a good time. Neither are the Wild Riders, though. They got a beautiful charge, but now they are stuck between a rock and a hard place, getting shot by Rangers, and Irondrakes bathing them in napalm, and they're going to get scorched into the next dimension. And they have no hope whatsoever. They try to close the gap. They might have been Rune of Wrath and Ruin, which would be the 4th or 5th time that's happened this game. Wild Riders just had no chance to make any impact on this battle whatsoever, and I think that Shetland probably should have just left them in reserve until the infantry was up in the face of the Dawi lines. But then the problem with that is that you're basically allowing your infantry to get blown up by Irondrakes and blasting charges. So it's not the easiest thing on the approach, but the battle lines have completely broken down now, and honestly the Wood Elves do have a lot of stuff in pretty scary positions if you're on the Dwarf side of things. They have the Wardens of Sithral and Wildwood Rangers out on the flanks. Those ones, though, are getting destroyed by the Iron Drake volleys, and that did like that's 1,500 damage at least. At least. They're down to half HP, tied down by Slayers, getting shot by Rangers, and that hurts. But another Wild Rider charge. That is a 2/3 strength one, though, and that could cause a lot of havoc here. Charging through the Iron Drakes, going into the Rangers, and then into the back of the Dwarf Warriors near the front. But they have been ruined, and that means they're slow as balls, moving at, I believe, like 24, 25 speed. They can't really chase down anything, and they don't have enough impact unless they have their charge bonus to actually kill Iron Drake. So kind of just staring at them, and now Dragonback Slayers are on top. They can imbue that 22% weakness to fire damage. Iron Drakes and Rangers fire in, and that will be the end of those Wild Riders for sure. And that is one of the things the Dwarfs can do on this patch that's just amazing. The Thane has a 22% weakness to fire damage AoE debuff, which is super good to pair with the Iron Drakes. And Dragonback Slayers also imbue 22% weakness to fire as well. But the Spellsinger of the Laura Beast and her transformation of Kadan, that huge Manticore, are on top of the range units, and they're starting to cause a lot of problems for the Dawi here. as the Wardens of Sithral pull out of that fight, realizing it's not really one worth taking, and they're going to go all the way around and flank and try to get at those Irondrakes and the Rangers and finish them off for good. And they're the biggest threat on the field right now besides Orion and that Great Eagle, because they have 59 melee attack and armor sundering. That is not a fight any of these dwarf units want to take. Flock of Doom finishing up, and that is the first transformation of Kadan that the Spellsinger has used. She's going to be summoning another one right now. She was chasing after those gyrocopters for a long time, killed 2 out of 3 of their models, but because she was chasing after it for so long, she wasn't on top of the Irondrakes in the early stages, and they've gotten a lot more volleys in than they would have otherwise, I think, if she had gone into the fight a little bit earlier, ignored that gyrocopter, and actually gone for the range stuff. The gyrocopter probably wouldn't have done anywhere near as much damage as the Irondrakes did, so I think that chasing after it, while it made sense to shut that down, and she got some value out of it for sure, it might have been better to be going after those Irondrakes from the start of the match. The Runesmith is in a bad spot. I had to use my final Wrath and Ruin on Orion to make sure he could escape, but I don't think he's going to be able to. There's another Manticore and a Great Eagle coming over, and they're going to goon up on that poor Runesmith. He has no support on that flank whatsoever, and the melee troops for the Dwarfs are really starting to just completely lose steam at this point in the battle. There really aren't a lot of them left. There aren't a lot of Azrai left on the field either. But things are starting to look a little bit dangerous. There are a lot of fear and terror-causing units on the field, and Orion is mostly full HP, nowhere near even needing to use that Cloak of Isha and that 44% ward save. So if he's able to stay away from the Dragonback Slayers and take out the Rune Lord, things could shift in the Wood Elves' favor pretty quick. And the Wardens of Sithral are free, and that is a terrifying infantry unit for us to face. Thankfully, we don't have to. We can burn them to cinder. We can burn them to ash and not even worry about their melee prowess whatsoever because they have low armor, 2 Irondrakes firing in, and they are going to melt away. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the Irondrakes DPS. Apparently, it was good before this patch, but it got even better with the changes to explosive damage, and that's amazing. I mean, that unit just melted away. That is a, I think, 1,300 gold infantry unit that just disappeared completely. 1,200, might be 1,200. Completely disappeared under a salvo of napalm. Glorious to behold as the Runesmith gets chased off the field by the Great Eagle and that Spellsinger. The Dwarfs are tattered. Wood Elves are looking a little bit more so, but their single entities are a problem. Thankfully, Orion is relatively low armor, and at the moment he's surrounded by Slayers. Dragonback Slayers, who are slowing him and imbuing a weakness to fire, which means if the Irondrakes can fire into him, he's gonna melt away, which should be really fun. Runesmith just shattered. We will not be seeing him again this game, but he will escape with his life intact, although his pride will certainly be tarnished, and he might have to take the Slayer Oath and the Slayer Crest after this one. Orion, using his mask to push through, looking super janky alongside those Dwarfs, and he will get through, going right after those Irondrakes, and my god, run away from Mel Gibson! He's got his Claymore and a burning hatred of Edward Longshanks. He had 1,300 HP. Before that, Dragonback Slayers imbued 22% weakness to fire. Now he has 350. He just lost 1,000 HP in a single volley of Irondrake Flame. And at this point, the Wood Elves have no hope of winning the game whatsoever. He is going to get slowed, and he will be chased down by the Rune Lord, by the Dragonback Slayers. Irondrakes firing into the rest of those Winterheart Guard. And that will be the end of the battle, pretty much. Glorious. Glorious indeed. The Dawi are victorious, and they are seriously feeling scary on this patch. I think that some of the changes they got in this patch have kicked them up, like, even before this. I know that some people have been saying that Dawi are, like, the weakest faction in the game. I disagree. I think I can maybe agree that they were, like, semi in the lower tier of factions, possibly. But one thing I think people don't really fully understand sometimes is that even the low tier factions have a lot, and look at that Slayer getting carried off by the Great Eagle, is that even the low tier factions are able to compete in competitive multiplayer. And not just compete, thrive. When I say low tier, there are no actual low tier factions in Total War Warhammer 2 right now. I truly believe that. I truly believe that every single faction has really strong matchups and really strong builds that can be very difficult for their opposition to deal with. So yes, there are some matchups in the game that I would consider like 6-4 or 7-3, where it can be very difficult to beat your opponent if they know what they're doing. but that's a particular faction matchup. You look at their entire whole, them as an entire faction, and all of the enemy factions in the game, every single race has 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe plus that are even or positive or dominant for them. And so when that happens, you're like, okay, well sure, Dwarfs might struggle against Chaos, but they certainly have a good advantageous matchup against Wood Elves. Wood Elves might struggle in the Dawi matchup, but they have plenty of advantageous matchups themselves. So I do think the Dawi are feeling themselves after the Empire Undivided update. I think they're doing real well. In terms of this game, Shetland Apache, I think his build was good. His rush build was good. Biggest issue he had was that his Wild Riders were Vanguard deployed. They were too close to my lines at the start. They got too aggressive, and I think he put too many eggs in one basket in terms of shutting down those miners, which makes sense because you don't want your infantry to get blown up on the way in. But he sacrificed more expensive units to do it, and a lot of it revolved around those runes of Wrath and Ruin, which are so powerful. They severely hamstring the mobility of Wild Riders, and when they don't have their speed, they do not make the impact they want to make. Great game to Shetland Apache. We'll be playing more games with him soon. Always a pleasure, my dude, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.